This is a story about silence, about absolute historical amnesia, about a truth so heavy and inconvenient that it was deliberately sunk. Deep beneath the Arctic in the cold, murky teal-green darkness lies not just a sunken vessel, but an entire forgotten crime scene. Base 211, the last Nazi fortress that even post-war efforts attempted to erase, as if it had never existed. We're talking about an installation deliberately excluded from all Allied archives and kept secret by the Kriegsmarine itself. Only recently, thanks to advanced multi-beam sonar technology, an anomaly was discovered in the waters off Svalbard, at a depth where eternal night reigns, challenging all official histories of World War II. This is not merely a U-boat fragment. It is an entrance, proof of something far larger and far more sinister that has lain here, locked by ice and oblivion, for 80 years. Our investigation starts with the search for one missing submarine, but leads us to an enormous submerged complex intended to be the final refuge for the Reich's most advanced experiments. Dive with us into the crushing pressure and the icy silence to uncover the truth. For this silence we are about to break has concealed the facts of what truly transpired in the far north in late 1944. The story begins not with a loud battle, but with a quiet disappearance, a white spot on the map of the Arctic convoys. In March 1944, convoy PQ-17 was sailing from Scotland to Murmansk, one of the deadliest routes, the Road of Death, where German U-boats and aircraft operated with ruthless efficiency. Yet, after its passage, the official record of a small British submarine, HMS P-33, which was supposed to provide escort cover, vanished. Its loss was conventionally attributed to a mine, a technical failure, or anything that would explain why its crew of 59 went down without a single distress signal. But years later, when researchers cross-referenced P-33's patrol logs with captured German U-boat diaries, a strange discrepancy emerged. No German submarine claimed to have sunk P-33 in that sector during that time. Furthermore, the reports of one U-boat, U-671, contained an odd entry about a contact with an unidentified submerged object, which was exceptionally large and did not match the profile of any known Allied ship of the era. The commander, Captain Lieutenant Hinkle, briefly noted that the object disappeared into the deep water, neither returning fire nor engaging them. This entry, later removed from U-671's final official report, was the first crack in the wall of silence. But the real sensation awaited us beneath the ice, where history itself seemed to have entered a perpetual slumber. We began our investigation looking for P-33, but instead, we found something the Germans would have preferred to leave on the seabed forever. Using multi-beam sonar, we scanned the sector corresponding to the last known location of P-33, an area north of Bear Island where the seabed holds deep, unexpected trenches. Instead of a clean seafloor contour, we received an anomaly so massive, so geometrically correct, that could not be explained by natural processes. The echo rebounded from something enormous, with straight edges, resembling a submerged industrial complex, an absurd notion for this isolated part of the Arctic. At a depth of 300 meters beneath a layer of silt and debris, lay a contour shaped like a gigantic concrete harbor. After months of precise scanning, we acquired the first visual evidence, a colossal, vertical concrete entrance structure, partially ruined, but undeniably man-made. This was not merely a bunker. It was an underwater fortress that should not have existed according to any historical maps or military records. This site, which we now call the Frost Complex, was so isolated and heavily protected that its construction during wartime demanded unbelievable resources and absolute operational secrecy. This site, we believe, was the mythical Base 211, whispered about by a few historians as a secret deployment point for the latest U-boats testing experimental weaponry. But why did P-33 vanish here? And why was its sinking so meticulously covered up? The answer lay closer to the entrance, in a deep trench where the sonar picked up another, smaller, yet far clearer object. Our remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, equipped with powerful spotlights, finally reached this trench. As the light pierced the murky teal-green gloom, we saw it. It was not the British P-33, but a section of a German U-boat type XXI, the most advanced submarine of the war, known as the electric boat. The critical issue is that these boats, capable of high underwater speed and extended submersion, were officially commissioned only in late 1944, much later than the P-33's disappearance. Furthermore, official records state that no Type XXI boat ever operated in the Svalbard waters. This wreckage lying here was physical proof that the historical timeline was flawed and that German experimental units were operating in the Arctic far earlier than acknowledged. The hull section we found clearly bore a serial number, though partially obscured by marine growth. U-3523. This submarine, according to official logs, was supposedly sunk by British aircraft much further south, near the Kattegat, in May 1945. But this was definitively U-3523. So what truly happened? If U-3523 was sunk here in 1944 or early 1945, why was its destruction rewritten in history to a different date and a distant location? Someone was deliberately fabricating the history of the war's final months. And most chillingly, next to the wreckage, buried in the silt, we found the first artifacts that seemed to tell their own brutal story of how the crew perished. Our ROV captured a site that was a frozen frame of tragedy, a Kriegsmarine helmet, heavily encrusted with barnacles, lying on the seabed as if discarded in a final, desperate moment. Nearby, partially submerged in the mud, were the shapes of metallic canisters, too large for standard provisions. These were storage containers for highly sensitive equipment. On one, we barely discerned a stenciled inscription, Estoff, Gem et Substance. Secret. Estoff was an extremely powerful and unstable oxidizer used in torpedoes and experimental rocket engines. It was inherently dangerous. But why was it being stored here, near a submerged base? This suggests U-3523 was not merely a transport sub, but a floating laboratory testing some new experimental weapon. This leads us back to the theory that P-33 may not have been a mine casualty, but the first unregistered victim of this new weapon test fire during a real patrol. This explains why U-671's commander, who witnessed the object, was forced into silence. The debris of U-3523 lay directly beside the entrance to the Frost complex, but critically, it was outside the structure. It looked as if it was trying to reach sanctuary, or conversely, was deliberately prevented from entering or sunk to stop its return. Very soon, we will dive deeper towards the entrance of Base 211 itself, where the final, most shocking discovery awaits. A sealed metallic container, locked to the seabed, bearing the ominous marking strictly secret, and a strange code that may finally explain why this entire story was buried for 80 years. The discovery of the U-3523 wreckage, a Type XXI submarine officially sunk elsewhere, created an immediate and profound historical paradox. The presence of Estoff containers and the silent tragedy of the Kriegsmarine helmet near the massive, unexplained concrete complex cemented our theory. This area was a classified operational zone, a final testing ground erased from naval history. But the most crucial question remained unanswered. What was inside the Frost complex itself, and why was the U-3523, the cutting edge of Nazi naval technology, denied entry and ultimately left to sink just outside its concrete walls? It was a disposal operation, a deliberate sacrifice. We needed to get inside. The entrance, a colossal, thick concrete archway, was guarded by a massive pressure door, likely jammed shut by 80 years of corrosion and the catastrophic event that sank the complex. The ROV survey showed the surrounding seabed was littered with smaller, less identifiable fragments, suggesting a violent, localized event, a deliberate implosion, rather than a natural sinking. We shifted our focus to the concrete archway, using the ROV's to carefully clear the silt and debris from the main door. The structure was immense, designed to withstand deep-sea pressure and likely to house several submarines simultaneously. The concrete itself was reinforced with a type of high-strength steel alloy that was cutting-edge for the 1940s, indicating unlimited resources were poured into this site. On the exterior face of the pressure door, beneath layers of rust and marine growth, our specialized imaging software revealed markings. Not typical naval insignias, but a series of geometric patterns and a prominent code. Project Gletscherfeuer, Project Glacierfire. This name pointed directly towards experimental weapons research, linking the complex not just to U-boats, but potentially to the V-weapons programs or even early atomic research that required extreme isolation. The Gletscherfeuer name was previously encountered only in scattered, heavily redacted post-war intelligence reports concerning the transfer of high-value scientific personnel. The U-3523, with its Eastoff cargo, was likely the final delivery vessel for this operation. But the door remained sealed, an unbreakable shield of concrete and steel, mocking our efforts. Then we discovered the key, not to the door itself, but to the nature of the complex. Tucked away in a crevice on the seabed, close to the U-3523 wreckage, lay a medium-sized metal container. It was rectangular, built of heavy-gauge steel, and designed to be watertight. It was secured to the seabed by heavy chains, suggesting it was never meant to float away. Engraved across its surface were the words, "Nur für den Oberstgruppe 555, only for the colonel of Group 555. Group 555 was a completely unknown designation. No military unit or scientific team listed in any Allied or German archive bore this number. This confirms our hypothesis. The entire operation was off the books, a ghost mission operating outside the standard chain of command. The container itself was sealed with heavy bolts, too numerous and too corroded to be opened by the ROV. We had to recover it. The retrieval operation was delicate, battling deep-sea currents and the risk of implosion, but the prize was too significant to ignore. Hauling the container back to the surface was an act of historical resurrection, pulling a secret directly from the abyssal darkness. Once the container was safely aboard and depressurized, the work of opening it began. The moment the rusted bolts gave way and the seal was broken, the smell of preserved, stagnant ocean water and old paper filled the air. Inside, protected by thick wax paper and a heavy oilcloth, were documents, water-stained but miraculously intact due to the deep-sea conditions and the container seal. These were the operational logs for Base 211. The logs confirmed its purpose. Not a standard naval base, but a deep water testing facility for a new propulsion system and a new torpedo type. The most chilling detail was a series of entries in late March 1944, the exact time the P-33 vanished. The log referred to a test firing of the Project Thor prototype against a live, unidentified target on March 27th. The P-33 was the unidentified target, a silent, terrifying victim of a German weapons test. Project Thor was described as a torpedo utilizing the volatile Eastoff, granting it unprecedented speed and range, making it virtually undetectable, a weapon that was not supposed to be ready until 1946. This explained the Eastoff canisters on the U-3523. But the final pages of the log contained an entry that changed everything we knew about the end of the base. The final entries were written not in German, but in English, a desperate final communication. The entry dated May 1945, long after Germany's official surrender, detailed an internal failure and forced scuttling of the complex. It stated that U-3523 was ordered to remain outside and was sunk remotely to prevent its high-value cargo from falling into hands that were now moving into the Arctic. The final sentence, scribbled roughly, was the most revealing. The last 3 men, the scientists of Group 555, are sealed within the inner chamber. The new owners of the Arctic must never know what lies beneath. This confirmed that the base was not destroyed by the Allies. but deliberately sealed by its own personnel, leaving behind not just a complex, but a human tragedy. The English text strongly suggests the authors were either British agents or defectors working with a faction of Allied intelligence. The key to the base's existence was not in Berlin, but in a covert, post-war agreement to bury the most dangerous secrets. We had proof of a forbidden experimental base, an illegal weapons test, and a deliberate cover-up orchestrated by the very people who were supposed to be securing peace. We now knew the truth about the U-3523 sinking, the fate of the P-33, and the existence of Base 211. But what was hidden in that inner chamber with the sealed scientists? The only way to find out is to breach the main gate of the Frost complex itself. The recovered log of Project Gletscherfer provided the final, desperate testimony of the base's demise. U-3523 was sacrificed, P-33 was the test target, and the complex was sealed from the inside. The last three men, the mysterious scientists of Group 555, were trapped in the inner chamber, a deliberate sacrifice to protect what they held. We had uncovered a cold, calculated cover-up, a secret maintained by the deep-sea silence. Now, the main objective was clear: breach the massive, rusted pressure door of the Frost complex and access the chamber to find the truth about what lies beneath. Our ROVs were equipped with specialized thermal imaging and deep penetration sonar. The conventional approach of blowing the door was too risky. The internal pressure difference could destroy the fragile historical evidence inside. We needed to find a structural weakness, a forgotten utility tunnel, or a point of failure from the original scuttling. The thermal scan near the base of the colossal door revealed something anomalous, a small, yet distinct, break in the concrete integrity, suggesting a deliberate cavity. The log mentioned a small access port for cable management, now probably sealed. It was barely large enough for our smallest, most agile ROV, the Peeper, a drone built for navigating tight, complex wreckage. Guiding the Peeper into the cavity was a nerve-wracking process. The silt made visibility near zero, and any snag could mean the loss of the machine. After several hours of careful maneuvering, the camera broke through into a dark, massive void. We were inside Base 211. The chamber was not flooded with seawater, but was filled with oil and stagnant, oxygen-depleted water, suggesting a unique preservation environment. The first images were breathtaking. We had breached a massive U-boat pen, designed for at least 2 vessels, yet it was empty. The walls were covered in strange, insulated paneling, and the ceiling was laced with heavy cables, far exceeding what was needed for standard electric power. This was a facility built for power generation and large-scale experimentation. Following the power lines, the Peeper navigated across the floor, which was surprisingly free of silt. The clean environment suggested the base was indeed sealed quickly. Then, near the far wall of the pen, we saw a second, smaller, and heavily fortified door, the entrance to the inner chamber. It was this door that the final English log entry mentioned. Near the door, leaning against the cold concrete wall, lay the first direct, visual evidence of Group 555, a small, personal kit bag made of heavy canvas, bearing the number 555. Inside, the ROV's manipulator arm carefully extracted a metallic object, a silver-plated officer's lighter, engraved with the initials HR and the date 1944. These initials, HR, and the knowledge that 3 men were sealed here, provided the first human connection to the ghost facility. Who were these scientists? And why the English entry in the German log? The inner door itself was a complex piece of engineering, but our Peeper identified a manual override, accessible only from the outside, indicating that the scientists had deliberately sealed themselves in to perform a final, unauthorized task. Using a microcharge, we carefully blew the locking mechanism on the inner door, a low-frequency shockwave against the deep-sea silence. The inner chamber was small, almost cell-like, and contained no living personnel, only what they left behind. The 3 scientists of Group 555 had completed their final mission. In the center of the small room, bolted firmly to the floor, was a single large cylindrical object roughly the size of a man. It was sheathed in a lead casing and stamped with a warning symbol for extreme radiation. This was not a weapon. This was a reactor core or a highly enriched uranium component. The men were not testing torpedoes for naval victory. They were working on nuclear materials. The final sentence of the log: "The new owners of the Arctic must never know what lies beneath," suddenly gained a terrifying new meaning. The entire operation, the secret base, the Type XXI submarine, the Estoff, was a massive, clandestine project to safeguard or test a critical component of the German nuclear program, hidden in the deepest, coldest place possible. The final, most profound find was not the reactor component, but a stack of documents beside it, partially burned but preserved by the lack of oxygen. These were the personal notes of HR, who we now believe to be Dr. Heinrich Roth, a physicist who officially vanished during the Battle of Berlin. The notes detailed a successful final experiment, confirming the stability of the core. But the most shocking element was a handwritten note, also in English, addressed to our American and British colleagues. It was a plea, explaining that the Group 555 scientists were defectors who were sealing themselves inside to prevent the core from being retrieved by fanatic SS units still operating in the area after the war ended. The rewritten sinking of U-3523 was part of the defection and cover-up plan, possibly coordinated by a rogue faction of Allied intelligence, to ensure this secret never became public or fell into Soviet hands. The scientists of Base 211 sacrificed themselves not for the Reich, but to prevent the nuclear secret from altering the post-war world. The submarine P-33 was simply collateral, an acceptable loss in the eyes of the orchestrators of this ultimate cover-up. The Base 211 was not a fortress of war, but a tomb built to secure the peace. Its true secret lies not in its destruction, but in the deliberate silence that followed, a conspiracy of omission that lasted 80 years. What do you think? Accident or a mission deliberately erased and left on the ocean floor?